Adjustment meeting for January 14th is now called to order at 6 p.m. Brandon, will you call the roll, please?
Gina Wilson.
Here.
Eric Inyard.
Here.
Paul Green. Here. Ricky Patel.
Here.
Jerry Keithley.
Here. At this time, do we need to look over the minutes? It's been so long. Did anyone see anything that needed to be updated? Any changes?
Motion to approve.
Gina Wilson.
Yes.
Eric Inyard. Yes. Paul Green.
Yes.
Ricky Patel.
Well, I just abstained since I wasn't here. Abstain.
Jerry Keithley.
Yes. The business before us tonight is JBOA 2434, requested by Jake Wright for 3 variances for the building setback, parking and floor area ratio, the general location being 1124 West Main. Is the applicant with us?
Yes.
I am. I'm hiding right behind you. Hello.
That's kind of unnerving.
I'm watching.
Okay. Okay. Marseille, would you be kind enough to give us the staff report?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This is the hearing date is incorrect on page 4 of your staff report. I apologize. I don't know why I have the 12th, but it's probably that's what I put. So the hearing date, of course, is January 14th. There are 3 requests before you. And as we talked before we went live there, this case and this lot has had a lot of activity over the years, dating all the way back to the 80s. And some things have changed, some things have not changed. There were many approvals and some things were built. So we'll dive into that now. So Mr. Wright has operated an office at 1124 West Main for several years, and they are looking to add additional space for their clients. The site is very peculiar and has several severe encumbrances due to the build line as established in the plat. It's interesting to me that they even platted it the way that they did, knowing that it really was not a buildable lot. So I don't think there will be any question about that as we move forward through the staff report. There's no change to the actual use. It is still going to serve as an office. They're just asking for a second structure to get more square footage. The zoning is OL, Office Light. The plat is Highland Edition, number 1712, and this is the west half, which is considered parcel J. And I gave a little bit of lot history. This was found primarily in a staff report by Robert Bell. And this is one of those files that you actually have to get the hard file out and pilfer through page after page after page, although there was a lot that had been scanned in as well. So originally, this was part of a lot split back in 2011. There was a request for a variance to the front build line and a variance to the side yard setback. actually, it goes back further than that. The first lot split application was JL 108, and it was not ever completed. And then they came back again, and it became JL 165, which was approved in 1996. So that was when we actually started having activity on this lot, not the 2011. So at that time, JL 165, they asked the west 20-foot road access. So when Highlands was platted, Highland Edition was platted, there was a dedicated 20 feet on the far west side of the lot, and it was just dedicated as access. But over the years, it became dedicated as a right-of-way for KOA Street. Y'all call it KOA or KOA?
COA.
KOA. I think it's because of the camper thing that makes it.
Usually you use all capitals for some reason.
I did, because I think I was thinking it was actually all caps.
No, it was the rodeo grounds.
Okay,
Yeah, the
so
rodeo grounds.
there's another small error. So the 20-foot access became 20 feet of right-of-way dedication. There was another case, BOA 352, which was approved as requested on March the 3rd, 2011. And this is found in section 24, township 18, range 12. One of the requests has to do with parking, and we'll talk about that a little bit here. I have that they request, the code would require 12, but with the setback adjustments that staff asked for, that reduces the actual square footage of the building to 1966, and it would really require only 11 parking spaces, and they have been able to provide 8. So when Mr. Wright came in, this has been an ongoing conversation for a very long time, probably. I could look at my emails to go back to see how far it goes back, but I think I probably just said no. We can't do that. And then he came back again, and we talked again, and then he came back again, and I dug some more, and then he came back again, and I dug some more. So we've had a lot of conversations. And it's very important to him as a businessman, a local businessman who's been here in the area for a very long time. It's very important for him to be able to grow his business. And so I found enough history and had enough conversations that this is the direction that we're asking. So I put in a comparison table, and the kind of the blue color says what the code requires. So in an office zoning, you have to have frontage of 75 feet along your arterial, which is I put Main Street or West 96, and then 50 feet along KOA Street, not KOA. And originally, when the lot was split, I have it documented later, and I can tell you it was actually greater than 50 feet. It was like, I can't remember. We'll flip through the pages and I'll tell you, because I've highlighted it. So when that was actually originally lot split, with the dedication the way that it was and the plat the way that it was presented, it met the requirements of the code. As it's shown on the site plan, it's like 49.83. I acknowledge that. We're going to round it up and call it 50, and he's good. Floor area ratio. So this is one of the areas that he's looking to add, to ask for a variance, and the code says that in an office zoning you can't cover more than 25%. So setbacks from center line on the arterial, this is where it gets really complicated. There's lots of drawings and lots of measurements on that site plan. I think I wrote the wrong thing. It says plat shows 50 feet from center line of property. I meant Main Street. If you look at it, it's like where they actually built it. They built it for more than 50 feet from that, was my point. From the arterial, the code requires 25 feet. Previously, they had a, yes.
50 feet.
Do what?
50 feet from.
Previously, the Board of Adjustment allowed for a 5-foot setback from KOA Street. And in this case, I reiterated that because of you wouldn't want the building all the way set to the property line, not knowing exactly where the curb is going to be, if they ever, which maybe they will, maybe they won't expand KOA. street. It's gonna be a challenge tonight. And then the last one is on the south boundary line. I asked them to revise it to be 5 feet from the south property line. So this one's a little bit tricky. Originally, that property, which is the levee, was ag, and it talks about it being ag, and the code requires it to be set back 10 feet, and they asked for a reduction to 1 foot. And then when they came back later, they set it at 5 feet, but it's residential, but it's irrelevant because nothing could ever be built there because it is. So that's what I'm saying. It's just a lot of muck. So if you look on page 6, it kind of shows you an aerial view of what is existing. And I do believe that Mr. Rive said that the ingress and egress is not accurate. It doesn't show what is actually built currently.
Correct. That was prior to the widening of Main
Right.
Street.
So at this point, Main Street has been widened at least once, maybe more, but I think at least once. Do you know when that was?
Well, I know that a piece of the easement was sold like shortly after we closed in August of 2014.
Okay,
So, I mean, they began on that, I think, early 2015 maybe?
okay,
I can't remember exactly, but it was pretty recent.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what you see on the site plan later, I call it kind of a little bird beak looking island between the two accesses. That is actually what is on the ground, not this large square. So if you look on page 7, shows the land use plan. We're good there. So kind of mid-page, it says supplemental information. So Mr. Rife is asking for relief from the build line. I would note that previously he was approved for the current home or office. The current office was approved previously through a Board of Adjustment action. And then we're asking for relief for this one, and then relief from the floor area ratio and relief from parking. So then we have a summary of the Board of Adjustment case, which was BOA 98. And this is where I'm talking about, they said that they did get relief of a variance from 50 feet to 40 feet setback, and then a variance setback, and that should be from instead of form ag, which was at that time the levy, I suppose, was zoned ag. I actually do not believe the levy was rezoned. I think that when INCOG was drawing their maps, somehow it got captured in the RS. I could be wrong.
Well, all of that area behind that levee was the rodeo grounds and.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever rezoned. I think it's just an error on the map. So we have Board of Adjustment case 121 with Ray Tucker, and that was an adjustment to the floor area ratio, allowing for 2 primary structures on 1 lot, and a variance to, I said it wrong, floor area ratio for 2 buildings on the lot, a variance to allow 2 principal structures on 1 lot, and a variance to allow existing building to remain and separate utilities. That one was also approved. There was another one, Board of Adjustment case 337, which it appears that it never went to the Board of Adjustment. And then the last one, which was March of 2011, which was BOA 352. And that one, you can see there are several conditions of approval. The biggest thing, when I finally found this one, it says no additional buildings on the property or additions to the existing structure that fall within the required 35-foot setback may be performed or constructed without processing additional variance requests to the JBOA. And that's basically how we got here tonight. Knowing that it was possible that someone might in the future come back, knowing that 2 structures had already been approved, but because it had never been built, you have 1 year to build that, and then if you don't build it within that 1 year time frame, it's no longer a viable. So we kind of go through, it just talks about the powers of the Board of Adjustment, and you all are very well aware of that. If you look on page 9, it talks about the evaluation and the recommendation. And I think the thing to keep in mind is, will this cause a substantial detriment to the public good or impair the spirit, purposes, or intent of the zoning code or the comprehensive plan? And that's generally the idea behind a variance. Is it going to cause any harm to the public? I do not see that being the case here. If you look on page 10, this is my actual recommendation. Pursue encroachment agreement with the city for space used privately within the dedicated right-of-way. That was previously one of the requirements. I don't know if that was ever done. And currently what you see in the right-of-way is right now, and we talked about this with Mr. Rive, the staff has talked to him. We originally, I think he had some parking in the right-of-way. We said, switch it around, move the dumpsters out here, put the parking on your own property, and then seek an encroachment agreement, which staff will work with them to get that done. It says keep sign and parking out of city right-of-way. I believe Mr. Rive said the sign is in the right-of-way.
Well, and I'm not positive where that right of way exists. I mean, it may be by like a foot. It's kind of even, it's perpendicular to Main Street. And it's as close to the building as we can get it on that curve there. So it kind of sits off to the side of the front door. And that was just per recommendation of one of the previous city inspectors, maybe, that said, hey, just don't go any closer to the street.
Yeah, I don't think it is in the right of way, but we'll look at that. And if it, oh, actually, it might be just over the line. It's very close. If it needs to be included in that, it's.
Well, I did kind of look at that, and there's still a signpost out where it used to be on the north side of the parking area.
Oh,
It
and
looks like the
first,
sign was removed,
yeah.
and it's been relocated back towards the entrance, and the building is set back from the right of way. I can't read this now, but it's around 14 feet, so it should be out of the right of way where it is today.
I think that's what I think. I think it's. We can. I guess my point is staff is willing to work with him if you approve it and there needs to be an encroachment that includes the signage. If you so choose, you can include that in a motion, because I did not make it a recommendation. But I'm still going to be willing to work with him if everything is approved. If the sign has an encroachment, we'll make sure that is taken care of. But from a technical perspective, it should be part of the motion. Existing storage building shall be removed, and I believe Mr. Rive can address that if he wants to. Proposed building site to be resubmitted, and he has done that. Brandon, can you pull up the new submittal? He has accommodated staff. He has moved the building 5 feet from the rear property line and from the west property line. And with that being said, it does make the square footage of the new structure smaller. And it does allow him to require one less parking space.
So it goes from 8 to 7?
No, it goes from 12 to 11.
12 to 11.
Yeah. So he would be three parking
So that's
spaces
it. Okay.
short at that time. As far as exteriors, we talked previously with Mr. Rive. Previously it always said it should match, and we have a corridor appearance review committee, and it requires, appearance review committee, and it requires things on Main Street to have a certain look, and I think that's how they got to where they are with the existing structure. And I believe Mr. Rive has hired a well-known architect, and I think that he will work very closely with the city to get a structure that fits within that and that it would be acceptable. Number 6, approval recognizes approved variance to front build line. And from what I could figure, based on what I was looking at, it would be about, it's basically about a 14-foot build line. If you were just trying to make it all lawful, that's what it would be. So that was just kind of letting you know what it would be. And limits and no access shall be established along the west property line, and they have no intention at this time of encroaching or allowing access on there. So on the next page, you'll see the site plan, and you see the shape of the lot, where the existing structure is, where they provided for parking. You can see they have 8 spaces. The wood, it's called the wood shed on here, that goes away.
Correct.
Okay, so that goes away, and he's moved it away from that south boundary by 5 feet in the west boundary. We have some assessor data in here. The next thing on page 15 of 70, you're gonna see the lot split information, and it's mentioned in here. There are two comments, and it says, number one, the levy district number 13, which I believe is now called the Jinx district, regulations to be followed with the levy commissioner's approval to be secured prior to any changes from the previously approved site plan or engineering drainage on the subject property. And currently at the city of Jinx, we require any commercial properties to go through engineering and to get approved by the city engineer. At this point, I did talk to the city attorney. Eric brought this up and brought this to my attention. I did talk to the city attorney. She did not know how it might be impacted and felt ultimately it would be taken care of during engineering and should not really impact your decision tonight. There are oftentimes projects that do get approved by boards and councils that can never be built because they can't meet the engineering requirements. I don't think that'll be the case here, but it could be. I will say that the Alta survey shows that there is a blanket levy easement across the entire property. There are actually 3 blanket easements. So I don't know if you realized that, Jake.
No.
Okay. So those are things that I'll talk to Mr. Rive separately. And then the second comment is there's a 6-inch water line, and that has not been moved to my knowledge and to Mr. Rive's knowledge. And that was, it says that it should be moved if there's ever a building built there, and that is at the expense of the owner, not the city. So making those notes open to the public on page 16. This is kind of just more, it's basically more of the same. It's a memorandum regarding the lot split, which was approved and with those conditions. If you look on page 17, I think the biggest thing is showing that access. You can see at the time that this exhibit was used, it does show an access easement on the far west rather than a right-of-way of 20 feet for KOA Street. Never. Okay, I'll get it, I promise. So you can't see the side page there. It doesn't tell you on the next page how many. It tells you that it was 125 by something, but it was cut off, so we don't know. Page 19 is a little bit more of the same information about the lot split. It was approved. Okay, here it tells us on page 20, it says that when the lot split was approved, it was 100, tract 1, which I believe to be the west half, was 125 feet by 59.83. So it clearly met the zoning at that time. And then once the additional right-of-way was sold or purchased, then it made the lot, the lot smaller. But we're right at 49.83, I believe, is where we're at. Let's see, has some more information. I thought this particular page had the most detailed information about the lots that we were dealing with. If you look on page 21, it again talks about the water line under, this is kind of where it began in the staff analysis that at that time, the public works director said there's a water line, and if you build something and it has to be moved, that's on you. And then again, talking about the levy commissioner. So on page 23, you kind of see the case map when they did the lot split, and we'll just keep going. On page 24 is the Board of Adjustment case 98. And at that point, it says that it was adjacent to an ag property. So in 1982, that was still considered ag. I think it probably is ag. If you keep going, the next, it doesn't really change again until you get to page 35. And this is the Board of Adjustment case 121, which allowed for 2 principal buildings on the same lot and a variance to exceed the 25% lot area. You keep going, the next, it doesn't really change again until page 45. And that's really, it's not really a change. It's still talking about the Board of Adjustment case 121. I don't think I made any more notes. On page 69, it talks about the Jinx Board of Adjustment case 352, and this is with LD Kearns. They were approved. It does talk about the existing business sign encroaching. So it's very close, I do know that. If you look on page, I guess that's it. That's pretty much to the end of it. And then they had approximately 10, I guess they had 10 conditions of approval, and that was in March of 2011. And Mr. Robert Bell wrote this staff report. So that is the summary of the history of the site. And if you have any questions, Mr. Riker's here to answer them. I can try and answer any questions you might have. That's pretty much it.
And how long have you owned the property?
Since August 2014.
Okay. And I had a question on the parking. How many employees do you have?
Well, so it's just my wife and I. So
Okay.
I'm in the construction business, and she does design and window coverings, and she has like a small little shop that very infrequently people come to look at things maybe she had in a staged house or something like that. So foot traffic on a normal weekly basis, I mean, it's by appointment only, technically. So it's very low traffic through there.
Okay, thank you. I was curious.
Are there any more questions from the applicant?
I apologize. Normally we would have the applicant come and stand.
Yeah, but that's
It's just,
Different times.
my spidey sense, you know? The 2011 case, I kind of remember that. And I think at that time, it did come up about the fact that they were going to widen Main. And at that point, they said something about putting a signal light at Pelham.
I did read that in some of the, somewhere. But I do not think that that is on the slate.
Especially since they just upped the speed limit.
Yeah.
It's like,
Okay.
And a lot of people are happy with that.
I know, 50 miles an hour.
I know, it's like,
Of course, I felt justified because I fly through there. So it was shocking.
I didn't even notice.
And it's only going out of town, right? It's not 50 coming in.
oh, it's
Correct.
50 coming in till
Is
you
it
get
50
to
coming
the
in?
church, and then it goes to,
Yeah, I think it's both
or
ways.
right close to your building.
That's just shocking.
Then it goes to 40, and then it goes back to 30 where it was
See, I've
before.
always justified it that faster I go, the less likely I'm gonna get hit with a golf ball.
I got hit on Elwood with one.
There you go.
That scared me into trashing my car. Because it's like, what?
Exactly.
Okay.
Is there already, okay, because I cut through, sorry, to get to research when I'm coming in from the west.
Mhm.
Yes, that on the west side of your property, there's not a curb already there, right? That's just an asphalt road,
Correct. That's
right?
correct.
But I believe it is wider than it was because they dug up a bunch of vegetation that had been planted there and took out a couple of large trees.
It did. And this was pretty recently, right as they were finishing up Main Street. They did widen, it seemed like the approach to Toa Street. And then they resurfaced, the section going back towards the ball
Right.
fields. So I think the approach there, the entry into Toa Street is wider than it was for sure.
The garden club would even put in irrigation for the
Oh,
plantings
wow.
at Toa Street.
That's too bad.
Okay. Any questions? Concerns?
Could you just restate again the question Eric had, that when the engineer looks at this, that, I guess that there's, for some reason, that it doesn't fit all of this, he just can't build, right?
Right, so he has to be able to show that he's adding a second structure, and he's got a lot of impervious already, so there probably is gonna be no impact to, I don't know how, it's all parking right now.
But a good majority of that lot is covered. Yeah, on the east side, it's all cement. And then
Right, so there's very
maybe,
little change to the impervious area.
maybe, I'll say 12 feet that's not currently covered by concrete.
So the new city engineer, I don't know if you've met him, his name is Chris Cloyd, and he is asking all the applicants on commercial properties to start with an earth change permit and engineering. And so that will be coordinated with his building permit and his site plan, and it will, any questions that he has, Mr. Wright will have to satisfy Mr. Cloyd's requirements and questions. And then, of course, we will also make known to the city engineer that there were previously requirements regarding the levy. Currently, Casey is one of our city engineers, and she did call, and you have to be 25, your structure has to be 25 feet from the toe of the levee. So that's the only requirement that we know for sure within that levee district and within that levee easement. You are allowed, but you have to be 25 feet. But I'll make sure that the city engineer is aware of the previous requirements in case something comes up.
And to your point, I think, engineering, anything's possible. It's just money.
Yeah.
At some point, that's diminishing return there, and we just say, well,
Yeah.
Right.
you can't do that.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I joked about that at a meeting, I think yesterday. When I first started in planning, they would say, well, you can do anything if you have enough money. And I thought they meant if you pay everybody off. And that's not what they mean. If you want to spend the money for the engineering. I don't know, that's what I thought. I thought, well, I guess there's a lot of corruption in these cities.
In these small towns.
That's not what it means.
Okay.
Any more discussion with the board?
Have we gotten any comments from the nearby businesses?
That's a good question. I normally put it in here and I forgot. We did get a call from the adjacent neighbor on the east. He may have called twice, but primarily he's looking to do some changes and expansion. So when I talked to him, he called me and asked what was going on, and I explained to him that he was fine. And then I think he called back and talked to Brandon and asked about what it would take for him to make some adjustments to his own property.
Is that directly east of Farmers? Is that strip?
Was it
No,
him?
I go the wrong
I
way.
do not remember that.
Yeah, directly east, it's Craig.
Well,
I don't think it was,
Okay.
I don't think it was Craig.
Was it across the street?
Yeah, it was across the street.
Oh.
The,
Attorney or
Oh,
something.
no, the hospital.
Okay,
Or the- not the
Oh,
hospital.
the doctor's
Yes,
office.
thank you.
okay, that was the one.
Teddy.
This whole time I thought.
Yes.
it was
Oh, it's the
Craig.
two-story right there on the corner.
Yeah, the one on the corner.
One on the corner.
So he was interested in knowing what changes he could make, but he has not made application.
But we've not received any.
So he's gonna be watching the one you get approved so he can do it.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah.
He's gonna want setbacks and stuff.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. So I there are any other questions, I would be happy to make a recommendation that, a motion that we pass based on the staff's comment, approve the 3 variance requests with their conditions based on, this is an extraordinary lot due to the size and shape. It's not going to create an unnecessary hardship, and there are conditions that are very peculiar to this particular property, and this would not be a substantial detriment to the public good or impair the purposes and the intent of the plan.
Second?
Gina Wilson,
Yes.
Eric Enyart,
Yes.
Paul Greek,
Yes.
Ricky Patel,
Yes.
Jerry Keith.
Yes. You will stay in contact with staff, and so you can proceed.
Thank you very much.
Good luck to you.
Best of luck.
Yes, we'll see how engineering goes.
Well, I cut through there a lot, so I'll be watching to see how if you
Yeah.
I can tell you this, my wife, my judgment likes very nice things, so I can tell you it'll look nice.
I'm driven by one.
Yeah, she takes me to task on keeping that thing up to snuff. So, no, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank
Be safe, be healthy.
Yes,
Good try.
Is there any other business before the board this evening?
Do we have, just historically speaking, do we have parking allocation issues sometimes over the years if people come in and want to build something and our parking requirements seem to be a little intrusive?
Yes, and it will be a very broad conversation in the upcoming Unified Development Ordinance. So I'll give you, we did get the comprehensive plan adopted, and we are now working on the Unified Development Ordinance. Staff has received the first 5 chapters. I did send them out to our committee. We have an outstanding committee, of which Mr. Enyart is a part of that committee. A lot of great professionals who work in the industry. Some of them have worked all over the country. Others have an attorney who's a land use attorney. We have planners, developers, builders. So I'm excited, and I hope they all take it serious and give me their input. But that is we're not really on track with national recommendations. And at the same time, it's a little bit tricky because I think in Oklahoma in general, generally speaking, we're not inclined to walk. We don't want to walk a long ways. So there's a higher demand in some cases for parking. So I think we're going to have to just make a decision and kind of settle somewhere in the middle. So it should be less restrictive than what we have now. And then in the downtown, probably a lot less restrictive, and really trying to get some shared parking agreements and some shared parking language into the code so that, if you have a business that really primarily is using the parking in the afternoons and evenings, why not allow other people to park during the mornings and through the midday? So we'll see how it goes. I think that's going to be a big conversation. I know it is, because it's very passionate. I've started a parking survey looking from an aerial view of what is available in the downtown, primarily focusing from the railroad tracks to the river, and literally counting one at a time. Okay, how many is here? How many are privately owned? How many are public property? How many are school property? And then also really trying to look at what does Main Street look like versus what we think it looks like, because I think that there's quite a bit of difference in people's memory of Main Street versus the reality of Main Street. And where do we want to go as a city? Because I think that Jinx is really got the most going for it over every community around. We already have river development. We already have an aquarium, an outstanding world-class facility. We have a beautiful little Main Street. We have quality of life. We have an amazing school system. We're so far ahead of the other communities, and just moving forward, I think it's going to be challenging and messy in the downtown, because that's where, besides Highway 75, where we've got a lot of raw land, we don't have a lot of raw land left within the city. And I think that redevelopment within the downtown is going to be our biggest challenge. It's going to be my biggest challenge, I can promise you. And so it may be your biggest challenge too, because I think that we will be forced to make some variances, make some room for some creativity and some projects that wouldn't normally get approved, but could really be game changers, depending on who we want to be. I mean, you know, that's something we got to think about. Who do we want to be? Are we just, you know, Jinx America, or are we? So I'll give you an example. I'm not from here. I live in East Tulsa, but I've lived here almost 25 years, and I only came to Jinx probably less than 10 times in 25 years. There's no reason for me to come to Jinx, but I will tell you, 2 of those 10 times I came and spent my anniversary in Jinx on the Riverwalk. So for me, Jinx is a destination. I'm not coming here to eat a whatever. I will come to Waterfront Grill, but in my mind, as a visitor, I don't consider that Jinx. That's the river. So for people outside of the community, there's a very, and people moving into the community, maybe in the last 10 years, there's probably a big difference in how they think and feel about Jinx versus people who grew up here and love it for what it always was and what they want it to still be. But how can you add to that in a great way that really moves the city forward with character and integrity and some tax dollars to see how we can get there.
And I think that's one of the things I know it's so many different opinions, but I was a firm believer that the outlet mall would help the city because it is a destination. And I know when I used to travel, yeah, when I used to travel, hey, I'm always looking for a good outlet mall. And I thought with everything that we have to offer down there, now
What's the
Road
status
infra-
of the mall?
It's the same.
Same.
It hasn't changed.
Always quiet.
Yeah, they say it's coming.
where if you read the latest article about Simmons and their financial woes, you might go, oh, maybe not.
Well,
But
they bought somebody else out.
they did. And there was just something recently in the national news about them, so I thought, I won't take a bet on this one. But it's a shame if it doesn't happen. I really think it would have been great for kids, quite honestly. But
What's the status on the requirements? We have a church right next to the brewery in the shopping center there.
I'm going to ask you if you all would like to adjourn the meeting, and then I will answer whatever.
Oh, absolutely.
That are not on the agenda.
The Jinx Board of Adjustment,
Was
January
adjourned.
14th,
Not the 12th.
2021 meeting is adjourned at
5:35 or 6:35.
6:45.
Yeah.
6:30,
6:45.
6:45.